Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion right here, right now, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Sleeping Warrior, Chocolate Saiyan, 10th Man, Righteous Force, Paul Hall and Quantum Eraser, along with a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome one and all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We're going to rattle our way through housekeeping, and then today's topic is probably going to focus mostly on the Black Swan, and I'm hoping that it's not going to be too negative or detrimental to the people on our own side who, while they claim to support us in the argument, we feel don't necessarily understand the argument and then have paraphrased the argument into something slightly nonsensical, and we've got stroppy with them. So I'm going to hopefully kind of draw a line under us getting stroppy with them and just hopefully more take them under our wing and explain how it actually works in regards to the sphere model and how it debunks it, rather than saying, how dare you change our logical consistency. So we'll hopefully get to that after the housekeeping question. So first and foremost, any signs of a physical geometric edge capable of measurement?
No, only a non-physical edge.
About that physical geometric horizon you globies all need. Anything?
Yeah, where's your edge, guys? You know that edge that you keep asking us about? Yeah, you've got one. We don't have to have one. But you absolutely do, because boats are supposed to go over it. So how's about showing it? Where is it? Come on.
That's something else I want to focus on. Can you remind me about that, Anthony? Our edge we don't have versus their edge they need and no longer have. So, yeah, Flat Earth Society. Any evidence at all of any Earth curvature?
Not from Carson City.
No. No evidence whatsoever of Earth curvature.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
They can't even define it, Nathan. I mean, there are still ballers that still push that gravity is a force, even though everywhere tells them it doesn't. They just need to go and read a few textbooks. Basic ones, like Year 11 stuff. Year 11, the age of about 15, they start getting a bit of Einsteinian stuff in it at Year 11, or just before they leave school. And there is further reading that we can do. And if you have to use finger spaces to help you, it's not that difficult. It says the key word that you need to be aware of is that it's an effect. It's not a force. It can't cause anything to happen. It's an effect of something, and we know what it's caused by. And you know that initial nudge that it needs. Yeah, we can recreate that in a day-to-day living, and we see it all the time. So we know what causes it. We don't need any force. But you guys need to be aware, the ballers need to be aware that it's an effect. So stop telling people it's a force. We know it's not. That argument's so 2019. Shout out to George Musa. No, there's no evidence for gravity, Nathan. They can't even define it.
Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology or astrophysics?
No.
Anybody else? Feel free. Any evidence of axial rotation?
Nope.
No.
looking down the list of people in the Discord server, see if there's anybody the fundamentalist sphere belief in there. Doesn't look like it's me. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
They need to prove it's a physical object first. They need to know its actual size, because they need to know that to work out its distance. Ping radar reflections from the sun. Well, if you look into the ping reflections for the sun, you'll come across a couple of key names: Christian Huygens and Eratosthenes, and you'll realise that Eratosthenes assumed the shape of the Earth to be a sphere, and you'll realise that Christian Huygens assumed that the size of Venus was the same size as Earth. Well, if the Earth's not a sphere and Venus is not the same size as Earth, then the distance and the calculations to the sun no longer make any sense. They don't work. So we don't even know what the sun is. And they keep telling us it's a hydrogen ball of plasma, whatever, nuclear, whatever, but nobody has any evidence of that. It's all done with spectroscopy.
Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without a container?
Yeah, in fact, the Flat Earth's got a claim. He reckons he's got some evidence for it. He wants to debate me on this evidence. He's just a nasty person, and I don't like talking to people that are overtly nasty, and he is that. So I can't have a conversation with him. But he also thinks gravity's a force, so that kind of stops me as well. But yeah, it's not good.
That's okay. Do you know what his claim is?
Not really. He'd have to come on the show, and we'd have to rip him apart. I honestly don't know, and I wouldn't like to guess.
Fair enough. Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
No, it's necessarily in their model when it comes to the horizon, because boats go over it. But as we all are aware, boats ain't going over no horizon. So no, there's got to be the evidence. Even Rumpus admits that the geometric horizon is nothing more than a calculation. How do we know it's even there then? And we don't know it's there. Oh well.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of said presupposed spherical Earth?
No.
Okay, that concludes housekeeping. So
Easy.
The problem is with the Black Swan is the boss has got involved now. Look, Dearth is on the scene, so he's not the man with whom to fuck. So we need to sort this out amongst ourselves, because I don't want to piss the boss off. That's the bottom line here. Now Dearth's involved, we've got to do something about this, basically.
I've got some formaldehyde in a bag. We could tie him to a chair and out. He'd never know it was us.
Okay.
Well, there's probably some support for that argument. That was a really good suggestion, I thought. So all champ one.
Not bad, Riley. Not bad.
So let's just go through the Black Swan without the Black Swan, which is to say that we're no longer going to, for the next few minutes, talk about the Karl Popper analogy. We're just going to talk about the logical argument that disproves the globe Earth. So if the Earth is a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, then every distance to the geometric horizon must measure no more than 1.225 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. Now, we have demonstrated with a picture that the horizon is categorically further than the physical geometry of the claimed Earth. Ergo, we don't have a physical geometric horizon. So the Earth is not a sphere of 3959 miles radius, as per their claim that we are on a physical sphere. The main crux of this argument is the difference between a perspective-based horizon that is absolutely not physical versus a physical edge of a sphere, a geometric position they measure and claim obscures things in the distance. That's a physical blockage that you cannot see past. And that physical obstruction they claim is based on their radius value. It is, by definition, physical. So from this point, when any arguments come our way about a justification for why this physical, geometric horizon is in a different position to their physical geometric model they claim we live on, they automatically lose the argument, because this position must be a physical geometric horizon. And the image, which will not be named with the terminology as catchy as it is for this purpose, that image is something simply backing up that logical argument. There are many other images like it that demonstrate a geometric impossibility for a horizon. And if we are on a sphere, we have a physical, geometric horizon. That is now debunked. If we don't have a physical geometric horizon, as we have demonstrated, we do not live on a sphere with sphere geometry. So the importance of this argument is to understand that the formulation in logic is to use the assertion we are on a sphere as the starting premise, and then debunk it based on the failings of being on a physical geometric sphere. So from there, that's the summary. We'll get into the discussion. We hopefully won't get into the people on our own side that are rearranging this logic by way of an analogy we've formally given called the black swan analogy. Now, we'll get into that later, but so far, does anybody want to add anything about the logic? Not the analogy, not the picture, just the argument in logic. Anybody at all?
I really
Well,
want to go on.
Go ahead, man.
I just feel the need to distinguish between the two positions that we can argue, but I don't want to do it yet because Nathan's expressly said not to do it yet. But it's important because if you understand that you can have 2 or 3 different arguments for the same point, right? And they've got different weights to them. Well, if you've got this, you're going to go with the strongest argument. So you're not going to pick the one that's in the middle or the weaker argument of the 3. You're going to pick the strongest argument, even though you can argue it similarly with other similar points, and they're very similar. You're going to go with the best one. And I don't know. I think we'll come back to it in a sec. Once Nathan's point's been concluded off, because it is important that we understand that there's more than one way to skin a cat. So let's try and finish Nathan's argument, Nathan's question or point first, and then we'll come back to
Content.
Yeah, this show is known for spotting logical fallacies. Am I right?
Yeah. When you're arguing for the globe and you attempt to formulate a logical consistency, which is the attempt, is it modus ponens when it's the actual logical consistency? If P, then Q, P, therefore Q? Well,
Yes. Yeah, that's modus ponens.
So if you were to argue what we have in the, I'm going to have to use the terminology, in the black swan argument, the logical part of it, if you're to argue that from a sphere point of view, you could only formulate it into modus ponens because it would be logically consistent and you wouldn't have any violations with it. As soon as it fails that acid test, it turns into a logical consistency that defies the premise it's based on. That's modus tollens. So you're saying if it has these properties, it will have this outcome. It doesn't have this outcome, therefore it doesn't have those properties. And they can, sorry, I'll lay you back in a second, Tenth. You can't formulate a sphere argument with logical consistency because we're not on a sphere. Therefore, what we have here and have to defeat is logical fallacy. Now, what QE has done with the black swan is taken a logical consistency that's based around the failings of their claim we're on a sphere. Ergo, it debunks us being on a sphere with logical consistency rather than what we get, which is logical fallacy. Go ahead, Tenth.
Yes, well said. And this is why it leads to begging the question, because they cannot have any of the evidence that they need for their sphere line up. So it comes across as a fallacy. And then when they're caught, it's always in the begging the question atmosphere. Well, because the Earth is a sphere, this is why it's 7/6R. And we said, well, you haven't even proven the Earth's a sphere yet. How can you immediately go to 7/6R? And so I think it's fantastic. And I think we should stay to the definition and Socratic method, as we always say, and words mean things. So I'm on board.
I would say that one of the best parts is that for so long they've tried to use this presupposed radius value on us to try to assert things like 7/6R and using the curve calculators, and they've gotten upset because we've always asked them, well, where did you get this radius value from? You know, how did you measure that? How did you confirm and verify that empirically? Well, now we're using this radius value to form this logical consistency, and as we do, we see that it does not work. So the same radius that they've been fighting for, actually used, proves their geometric horizon wrong, actually debunks their globe. Well, they've been debunked by their own math, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, if you don't believe we live on a spinning ball, because we don't. And
Exactly.
The math is there. You guys love the math, right? they always cry about math as reality. Well, here's your math. And here's your reality that your very math denies. So enjoy that, and welcome to Flat Earth.
Up until now, I've said, in R you trust, when we had a draw. Because essentially, the argument they put forth, which is tenable, just, required faith in R. So I just poked fun at it. I can't say that anymore, though, as of now, because of the Black Swan argument. So no, it's not in R you trust anymore. You cannot trust in R anymore. It's been debunked. So no longer just trust in R faith-based fundies. Not even your faith can save you anymore. R has been debunked. In R you trust does no longer applies. Because it's gone. We've taken it away from you. The geometry is the R value. That is your geometry. Your R value gives you your geometric horizon. X marks the spot on Mick West's model when he shows you the side-on orthographic view. You've got a little X with the word horizon on it. It's placed right on the edge of the sphere based on the radius. So we've now taken that radius from you. You can't trust in sphere geometry anymore. It's been debunked. Goodbye R. Goodbye Earth-based geometry. Goodbye sphere Earth. Now, those aren't wishy-washy statements. Those are facts. Now, for our own side that don't recognise the power of those statements, you need to wake up to the reality of this argument pretty sharpish, rather than diluting it or changing it. Sphere Earth R value's been debunked. They can no longer just trust in it and throw it back in your face and throw you a load of geometry about what the atmosphere is doing. When you've debunked the geometry, they can't extrapolate out 7/6 R or fudge it to infinite over R because we've taken that away. We've busted the geometry. So understanding that the physicality of their argument is based on their geometry, and that requires a physical horizon. And they don't have one anymore. Game over, checkmate, no argument can rebut this.
The ball has been busted. I love it.
Okay, so let me address, I'll do it as brief as I can. Right, there's two ways, right, when you get a piece of evidence, right, it's going to fall into one of four categories. It either doesn't prove either model, or it doesn't support either model. Second, it supports both models and it's inconclusive. Third, it supports ball, but doesn't really support flat. Fourth, it supports flat, but doesn't support ball. Now, depending on how you interpret the evidence, you can argue it whichever way you want. With the oil platforms, there's two ways that you can argue it. You can argue it as one, a flat earth proof, or you can argue it two, as a ball earth death killing nuclear bomb. Now, if you argue it as a flat earth proof, you can say that that's a white swan in the sense that there's lots of flat earth proofs. What's special about this one? It's no more special or less special than anything else. And you could argue that that's a valid criticism. You know, it makes sense. But if you argue it as a ball earth killer, then you apply modus tollens to it. And when you do that, you're no longer debunking something that Nathan's presented or John's presented or me or whatever. It removes the personality from it. and it requires logic to be debunked, and you can't debunk the logic because modus tollens is there. So if the Earth's a sphere, then the horizon must be 1.2 miles away. Horizon is not 1.2 miles away, therefore the Earth cannot be a sphere. So the logic there is supported by the evidence and proven by the evidence, and they can't debunk the logic. So they're left with just the evidence. The facts are there, indisputable. So you can't get past the facts. The only thing that they can do is immediately remove the physicality of the geometry and replace it with refraction. But the minute they do that, they admit then it's no longer a geometric horizon. Our very point, the thing that boats are supposed to go over. Because if what they say is true, then boats go over a geometric horizon, but they don't disappear because there's a geometric horizon that's in the middle ground or the foreground, and nobody can point it out. So it forces them down to admitting that the horizon is not a geometric horizon. It's a non-physical horizon that boats can't go over. Well, that's been their argument. If you look at the history of this argument, Aristotle said it donkeys years ago. He comes up all the time. But that's the best way to argue this argument. So even if you don't agree with us that it's strong or whatever, fine. Sit back and watch. But you're going to have to debunk us if you don't agree with us. If you think it's a white swan argument in some way, debunk the black swan argument against the ball first, because that's the bit you're going to have to do, because it's logic supported with evidence, and it is proven that the horizon is not 1.2 miles away. So don't try and argue that it's a white swan flat earth proof, because, yeah, it is a white swan flat earth proof. There's loads of them knocking around.
Let's stop.
But there's not that many that directly smash the ball to bits, because this one does.
Just before you reassert that three more times, that's the bit I was going to criticise you on at the end. So I'm sorry to interrupt. It's only because you started to repeat yourself. So no, to assert that because there's plenty of other images that demonstrate a geometric impossibility for a horizon, therefore there's lots of white swans. There is no way you can give me an explanation for why a horizon would be described as any kind of swan, unless there's an analogy attached to it. So if you go, well, it's just a white swan. Well, what do you mean? Why is this horizon analogous to a white swan? If you're arguing for flat earth proof or otherwise, explain to me how in analogy you can ever call a horizon a white swan. There's no purpose or meaning to it whatsoever. It's meaningless. But what it does do is also dilute the fact that we have a very strong argument that utilises a Karl Popper analogy, where the exception to the rule being the geometric understanding that everybody's under, that we're on a bloody sphere with a horizon that's physical for boats to go over. That's the white swan in an analogy we've given, where we present something that counteracts that and debunks physical geometry. That would be a black swan. But to suddenly say, well, because you've got an example where the common understanding is a white swan and this is uncommon, well, I see this as quite common. Well, yeah, well, then you're just diluting an analogy and calling a horizon a swan for no reason at all. Why would you call a horizon a white swan? It makes no sense. Which is why when 10th Man said on the pre-show, it's like, fine, let them talk about it. They're just looking silly. You are, because you won't be able to give me an analogy for a flat earth proof image that makes sense to call it a white swan. It doesn't make any sense. The only reason it makes sense to them is because they're extrapolating out from the original analogy of black swans being geometric impossibilities, non-physical horizons as the Western world understands. So by analogy, the Western world might, 100 years ago, have thought, because everybody was under the same impression, that all swans were white. Currently, everybody thought, incorrectly, all horizons are geometric. Well, you go out into the real world, off this platform, out of echo chambers that to say, yeah, we all know it's flat. Well, no, most people don't. Most people think all swans are white. Most people think the horizon's geometric. Most people still think they're on a sphere. That's still the argument here. So unless you're in some completely isolated flat earth community where you're all tapping each other on the back going, yeah, we understand it's always a flat earth horizon. Oh, well, that's wonderful. Shame about the rest of the Western world. All 99% of them, who absolutely disagree with you and think all swans are white. All horizons being geometric, boats are going over them, buildings are being obscured by them. That's the whole point of the argument. And until such a day that people relinquish any notion whatsoever of us having a geometric physical horizon until such a time there'd be no point to disregard it and see it as commonplace. But when it becomes commonplace, you can't then use an analogy that something commonplace is a white swan, because it doesn't make any sense by analogy. So, yeah, it demonstrates that there's plenty of people who don't understand the analogy and would rather rearrange the analogy into making a flat earth proof commonplace because they've captured lots of them. Well, good for you. In analogy, that's still lots and lots and lots of black swans. Because until the Western world appreciate that we don't have a geometric horizon, white swans are always going to be geometric horizons. Physical. That's the point here. They've shown us that Earth is a physical sphere with a physical horizon for boats to physically go over and be physically obscured by. That's the whole premise of their argument. And it's the argument that everybody, apart from us, we're the exception. We're the black swans. We're the exception to the rule. Because most people out there are the white swans under the understanding that we've got a globe Earth. So that's what we've got to focus on, rather than diluting our bloody argument that's absolutely watertight. You can't have a geometric horizon be loomed. It stops being geometric. So having a physical location on a globe is imperative. The whole mathematics is based on it. And that particular assumption requires a physical edge for boats to go over. We don't have one. And that's summed up and proven within the logical consistency. You can't suddenly start moving a physical location. So it started off with the obfuscation, we don't have an edge. Yeah, you better be damn sure you deny it quick sharp, because you have. You've definitely got a physical edge on a globe for boats to go over, and we've definitely debunked that with modus tollens. So let's be real about what's happening here. You know, let's not be prideful about who has debunked it and who hasn't. And well, we'd rather that crowd wasn't the ones that gave you a watertight argument that ended sphere geometry. So let's dilute the shit out of it. Call it a bloody white swan when that makes no sense in analogy. Because we're all locked up in echo chambers. We'll pat each other on the back and are of the understanding that everybody thinks the Earth's flat. And it's commonplace to have flat Earth horizons. Well, no, by perception and by general understanding of the Western world, no, they've all got sphere horizons. That's what we're trying to fight against. So let's not fight against us because we're debunking it and dilute down our arguments. Thank you. Shout out to Dearth.
Can you say concise?
It was concise. It was repetitive, not inconcise. Inconsistent.
I think the best way to put it...
he was saying, can you say concise? Because that was pretty concise, yeah.
I think he was being sarcastic, actually. I think he was saying, can you not keep saying it over and over again? I'm excited, I'm pleased, I'm saying it with slight aggression, but with a smile on my face. Because on the one hand, this is a nice position to be in. A little bit of tussle on our own side. You've got to remember, this isn't costing any of our own side any sleep. Doesn't matter who we're talking about that maybe doesn't understand the analogy or the actual logical consistency. They're not losing sleep over it. So, you know, it doesn't really matter. But it does, because we've still got to face the real fact of the world we live in and the people around us who definitely think they're living on a sphere. So let's just keep that in mind when we're trying to make our argument, which isn't the most simple argument. We're not going to claim it is. Did anybody think that an argument that would categorically, unequivocally debunk the globe was going to be really simple, just as easy as putting a picture up? No. Obviously, it requires a little bit more effort than that. An effort that Quantum Eraser has gone to through a process of thought that requires somebody to come along and debunk either the original premise of a globe, can't do that, can't take the logic apart on that standard, that's a total fail, or claim we've got two horizons, which we definitely don't, we've only got one, or claim the geometric horizon necessitated in a geometric model isn't geometric because it's loomed, ergo not geometric. So they're checkmated from about 4 different sides. So just recognise it for God's sake. And hopefully, like me, I didn't get it straight away. The people who are going, oh, no, it's a white swan, really. It's so common that we have flat earth horizons. So common that everybody I go out and meet, I tell them, and they go, oh, yeah, I already knew that we got a flat earth horizon. I recognise this glaring contradiction with the basic rhetoric we were born and brainwashed with. I recognise that all the time. No, people won't say that when you go out to them. So no, it's not the commonplace that people
Nathan, what's,
understand non-geometric, non-physical horizons. That's not commonplace. Go on.
Nathan, what's a flat Earth horizon? That doesn't even really make sense.
No, like I say, by analogy, you can't describe a flat Earth horizon as a white swan. It makes absolutely no sense.
But we can describe a flat Earth horizon, though. We can say it's the point where the sky appears to meet the sea or the land.
Yeah, by definition, that is the horizon.
No, but that's the flat Earth horizon. I
that's
think that
both.
works because they always say,
both.
don't they, well, why can't you see Paris from New York? Well, aside from the fact that it would be like tiny and we don't have bionic eyes, and there's like something in the way called atmosphere, which acts like a fluid. It's like a layer of gas that distorts what we see. I mean, yeah, sure. If we had like Superman eyes and everything and perspective wasn't an issue and there was no atmosphere, you could, but that's not real world, is it? But what we can say is the sky does appear to meet the land and it doesn't actually do that. So that is a totally consistent interpretation for a flat Earth horizon. Not consistent on a ball, though.
Yeah, the only difference between those two things, the apparent position where the sky appears to meet the physical ground on a globe, that's a geometric horizon. Well, the apparent position where the sky seems to, all these redundant terms, meet the ground and changes with optics and clarity of air, well, that's got no physicality attached to it whatsoever. This is the basis of the argument. They're arguing physicality and geometry, spherical geometry, to the ground we stand upon. Now, every measurement we take shows it's flat, but they still want to argue it by hijacking the optics of it and turning the optics into geometry. Well, once you've removed optics, flipped it on its side into orthographic view, and claimed physicality to horizons, there's no turning back and engineering in the refraction values. They are geometric equations to give you these amounts that bend around the physical geometry. But the physical geometry remains the same. It's based on a fixed R value. And you've still got an X in their model marking the point of the horizon. And that horizon's geometric. It's a geometric model with a physical edge to obscure things in the distance. Until you debunk it. Then it's not that anymore. That's the crux of this matter. No longer do we have geometry to Earth claimed to be a sphere. My God, why isn't everybody embracing this?
Johnny?
Yeah, I think maybe it takes a bit of time. So the first thing is maybe to ask every globe earther, where do you think on this picture is a geometric horizon, which I think you've been doing, the panel has been doing, and that's where you can see them sort of start to sweat. You know, before having to go into, well, not to say before, but I think that's a starting point. Show me the geometric horizon and then go from there.
Nathan, I've just realised when you asked that question then, you said, why aren't people supporting this? That's actually a logically fallacious argument. It's actually an appeal to motive fallacy. You can't question their motives, but you can point out that, well, there is an issue here. We can't appeal to their motives, but we can point out that there might be an issue here. We can't really ask that question because
Hey, Anthony.
Well
Anthony.
done. Well spotted. Kudos, Anthony.
Anthony.
Go on.
Your forte is law, right? You studied law?
Yeah, and evidence.
Yeah, so if the evidence points to something, what do you call that?
It depends on how strong the evidence is. There's different
Let's
types.
say very strong.
Yeah, if it points to something with a strong set of evidence with it, it becomes, well, you start after weighing up the evidence and start looking at the weaknesses in the evidence if it's strong. And that's what we're supposed to be doing now. Look at, because you can't just assume that it's strong just because it appears to be strong. But the absence of counter evidence or counter arguments or counter logic from the ballers kind of leaves it hanging in the sense that, well, where is the alternative arguments or where is the alternative evidence? Where's the horizon that we must be getting?
Get him 10th.
Hang on.
Get him 10th.
I'm going to get you here, Anthony. You have a jury. You have a judge. You have the law. If they're going to convict somebody for 99 years in prison or even to a death sentence, they must have evidence to do that. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. The evidence is the key. So forget the motive. Who cares why he killed that person? We have evidence he killed that person. So you judge by the evidence.
That's true.
Yeah, but that's not
Okay.
applicable.
It's not-
That's not applicable to this case. That's not applicable to this case. But hold on a second. The evidence is already established. So it's not an appeal to motive or intent fallacy if you question their understanding or their motives after the fact. So it's not an appeal to motive or intent fallacy. The argument is laid out. It's very simple. And if they don't catch the argument and they try to dilute it, then the appeal to motive intent fallacy goes by the wayside. It's not fallacious. There's a rooster in the hen house. In other words, thanks.
Yeah, if it's happened, there is a reason. Knowing the reason, yeah, okay, you could argue that, Anthony, but there's obviously going to be a reason behind it. Now, I'm still going to back Huey when he gave, I've forgotten whose razor it is now. Don't attribute to malice. Who is it? Hamlin's. Hamlin's razor?
Hanlon.
Hanlin's.
Hanlon. Hanlons. Hanlon's razor.
Hanlon's razor. So don't attribute to malice what can be accounted for by stupidity or ignorance. Yeah.
Well, personally, to me, one of the biggest, and I know I probably sound like a broken record, I keep repeating it, but biggest evidence to me that this argument is detrimental to their side is their change of position on their argument. Because again, years and years, we never heard anything about multiple horizons. We know they never argued for that, right? All of a sudden, they do. So what is the changing factor? Is it because of tell me what it is, Riley.
It was Rumpus when he contacted Andrew Thomas Young, and Andrew Thomas Young told him that he couldn't refer to looming anymore because he had it wrong. After all the time he's been telling us about super looming, and the Rumpus now has been told by Andrew Thomas Young that he can't use looming anymore because of historical reasons, which he was a bit wishy-washy on. He hasn't really explained it. I have asked him what was the email. See the email for why he said you can't do it, because I want to make sure that Rumpus gets it right and he applies it consistently. But he hasn't presented.
He has. I've heard it in clips. So the reason Andrew Thomas gave him was because he should be describing it as standard refraction. And this was already covered on the very first presentation QE did and when he presented Andrew Thomas Young's information, which is to say that when you move over to the actual description that they've been giving till now, it's standard refraction based on geometry 7/6r, also known as terrestrial refraction. That's what he's describing. The effect of light bending around the physical geometry of the sphere based on its R value, 7/6r. Terrestrial refraction, also known as standard refraction. Not looming, standard refraction based on the geometry, which we've debunked. So this was already seen well before Rumpus disclosed his error. QE spotted it, disclaimed it, and gave it to the audience as a defence already. Here's the information on what they describe as looming from their alma mater, this Thomas Young dude. Now here's what he says about refraction. Here's what he says about terrestrial refraction, standard refraction, geometrically based on the physicality of the sphere they're arguing with its, guess what, physical horizon. Total fail. So it's already there for you to find yourself exactly as QE did. Now these sorts of things that QE has obviously gone into and researched before he even formulated the logical consistency, that's work. He's covered all of his bases. He's done it properly. So to the people out there, again, I've got to stress this, who just come across it and go, oh yeah, great proof, yeah, just another white swan. Try and pay attention to the fact that lots of work's gone into this to make it undebunkable, rather than just going, oh yeah, cursory glance, this just looks like another flat earth proof, so I'll call it a white swan. There's loads of them.
You know, this situation kind of reminds me of when a certain Glober went to have a certain interview with somebody named George Musser to try to back him up on his claim that gravity isn't a force. And George Musser stuck to his guns and said, clearly that it's not in this mainstream narrative that we're dealing with. So it kind of sounds like the same thing, almost a little bit worse though, because now this argument, if people haven't noticed, has forced somebody like the Rumpus, who has argued with us for years about how he has never argued. Now he has to change his position about how he has never argued that the geometric horizon is physical, and now has had to refer back to the subject matter expert, Mr. Andrew Thomas Young, I think his name is, and had to be told that he's been using the word looming wrong after all this time. And looming is the one thing that they've been trying to use to rebut this argument. So if that's not, if that doesn't stand out
So
to
what
people,
is looming though?
Looming is an atmospheric effect that describes things moving with respect to the horizon, according to Rumpus's own words about 2.5 years ago. And that's the description given by Andrew Thomas Young on his website. It's the description of an atmospheric effect. The problem is...
Hang on.
Hold on, just let me get to the end. The problem is this isn't an atmospheric effect being described, and that's what Andrew Thomas Young has explained to Rumpus. What you need to be explaining is the begging the question fallacy that is on steroids with 7/6R. You're going to be assuming geometric horizons, therefore assume refraction based on that geometry. Don't talk about actual atmospheric effects because it makes no sense to loom the horizon above the horizon. Obviously, I'm now paraphrasing, but he's told Rumpus, just beg the question. Automatically assume R. It's terrestrial refraction you're describing, also known as standard refraction, as disclaimed by Rumpus. That bit's definitely based on his own words, Rumpus's own words. So yeah, he's told him straight, just beg the question and assume R. Don't take the actual effect of the horizon that's supposed to be geometric and loom it above itself. That's non sequitur, as we've been telling him. Well, instead, assume R, use 7/6R, or change the value based on the radius, which is giving you your geometric horizon. Don't base it in actual reality, base it on the geometry and beg the question. What's wrong with you, man? You've got to beg the question. That's what he's told him.
Let me re-answer that in a different way. In the Skunk Bay footage, which I'm sure we've all seen, we see stretching and shrinking, squashing and stretching, whatever you want to call it. But the name for what we see in that Skunk Bay footage is called towering and stooping. Looming is their version of towering and stooping. Well, we see towering and stooping because we see stretch and shrink, right? We see it. That's an absorb. But they need an alternative because that's based on straight lines. And Rumpus likes to tell people that light never travels in straight lines. So therefore, he dismisses that because he doesn't want that to apply. But the problem he's got is, well, we do have straight lines. Light does travel in straight lines. It deviates from straight to a negligible amount. That isn't enough for you to negate that light doesn't travel in straight lines, because it does. What Rumpus needs to be able to show, demonstrate, prove is that light will follow a curved path in the atmosphere, because he needs looming, the equivalent argument on their model, to explain what's going on, but he needs to demonstrate it. Now, if you think about Dang Joss' video with the butane gas going over that curve, they're extreme examples of what doesn't happen in the atmosphere, because we don't have liquid butane in the atmosphere. We have negligible amounts of temperature fluctuations. So he's never going to get anything similar in the atmosphere. But there's other examples where Greater Sapien, the guy that stole $20,000 and no one batters an eyelid about, he demonstrated with an ice cube that he could make light bend. But we don't have temperature fluctuations that severe in the atmosphere either. But Rumpus needs to show that it curves in the atmosphere, and he can't do it. So until he can show that it curves, he can't even have looming, because looming is just another word for towering and stooping. But instead of relying on straight lines, which we all know that light deviates from to negligible.
No, it's not. Looming is not towering and stooping.
It's that's what Rumpus described it as. He described it as their version.
That's how he Rumpus needs to be institutionalized. Looming is not towering and stooping. Sorry.
That's how he described it in that hangout with Al K. I listened to him say it.
I don't care.
We've already established he doesn't understand it, Anthony, so let's not paraphrase what he's misunderstanding, because he clearly doesn't understand and he's been corrected. But what he's been corrected with and told to do is assume light travels in a curved path by way of assuming a curved path with 7/6 R standard refraction. He made that clear. What he's been told to do is beg the question and assume that the atmosphere is bent and the light is bending with it. That's precisely what he did on his most recent presentations. Simply beg the question now. Don't assert an atmospheric effect. Beg the question. Assume the atmosphere is bent around a spherical Earth, all with a begging the question R value. So don't talk about looming. That's not what it is, Rumpus. Just beg the question. Use standard refraction. Bend it around the geometry we're assuming with R in this model that isn't air. It's a model. And the air we claim is in the model will be bent based on the geometry that they don't have anymore. He's screwed. Rumpus knows it. Andrew Thomas Young is just confirming what he needs to do to solve this problem. To solve this problem as a glober, you must beg the question of an R value. And the R value gives you a geometric horizon that's physical. We don't have that. This doesn't solve the problem. So they're screwed. It's another checkmate.
Precisely.
Yeah, I wouldn't be quoting Rumpus anytime soon. He was caught saying that when you step outside your house and there's a tree in front of you, that tree is refracting.
Yeah. In his model, I've just said, when you assume terrestrial refraction, you assume Earth has a curved surface and the atmosphere is wrapped around it in a curved manner. Now, therefore, everything in their model's always looming. Doesn't matter what it is, nothing's where it's supposed to be. It's a world of fantasy because we don't live on a curved surface. We've proven that because the curved surface they claim is based on the geometry that we no longer have. Hey, Adam.
That's a bit late. Afternoon, gents, ladies, whoever's in the house.
Adam, how can we communicate to the people on our own side that we're debunking the physical geometry asserted in the model with the black swan?
I don't know. I'm trying to do so.
Maybe
I don't know. Is the honest answer. I'm coming up the same thing. The lack of support, or the need to comment that I'm hearing appears to not be recognising the significance to me still. I don't think people have fully got what's being said.
Grammarly.
Yeah, I found the same, Adam. And my acid test has been asking. It's only been a couple of people, maybe 3 people that have come to me so far privately and said, normally about us moaning about our own side, changing it to a white swan. They're like, "What's your problem? So what?" And my rebuttal is to say, "Okay, fine. If you're typically they're saying, look, we're on your side," which is great. You want to hear that, but by the same token, my response to them is, "Can you give me the argument back? Just explain to me." In modus tollens would be great, but the general gist of the logical argument we've put forth, if you can give me that, I'll then accept that you understand it, and that when you say you're on my side because you understand my argument. Our argument, I'm just saying when I've spoken to people personally. So that's what I've asked, and so far, not so good.
Nathan, I don't want to keep beating the issue, but let me say it one more time from my perspective. We have communicated it perfectly, properly.
Well, no, we haven't, have we?
Let me finish, please. The evidence will show that there's a collector's edition. There's all these other shows. Today's show. We are effectively communicating what it is. Now, what they do with it is up to them, but it's not because we have not communicated it effectively. I'm done.
Agreed.
Well, go ahead, Adam, and then I've got something to add to that. Go ahead.
If I was to, I'm not criticising hers or anyone, but I think if you was to look at that from a management point of view, and that's a team, and your team doesn't understand something, and management stance says, well, it's not my problem, I've effectively communicated it. Else you may be able to sit there thinking I've effectively communicated. You haven't. So maybe
or they're not our team.
Well, no, let me finish. The question is, what do you want to achieve? And that should guide your next actions for me. Not
look, I watch
what have I done
European...
and why my motivation was there. But really, it's not about that. It's about what we're trying to do, guys, and what do we need to do next then? If this hasn't worked, what do we need to do next to try and hopefully get those that are on our side grasping it fully, and if not supporting us, then maybe not downgrading it. That's all I would hope to achieve.
May I chime in again?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, of course, man.
Okay, let me chime in again. I live in the real world. Team has a coach and players. The coach has a play. They practice it all week. They go out to do it, and say one or two members of the team don't do it properly. So they go back and say, look, man, we practiced this thing all week. Why did you not follow the instruction? Let's do it again until you get it. So during practice, they do it to where everyone knows they got it. Then they go play again, and they don't do it again. So the coach says, trade this guy. He's not part of our team. That's real world sports and the drama that goes with sports all the time. We have communicated this properly. It could prove one of two things. And you brought in the word team and management. So here's what it proves. They're not part of the team.
Well, let me continue that analogy then. I would suggest, Team Flat Earth Debate has been working on set plays hard all week. And what we've done now is gone and had a look at Team Globebusters when they've been playing, and they've not followed our plays. But we know them perfectly. And they should know them perfectly.
Yeah. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on, Adam. Hold on.
I'm not justifying.
Hold on, just one sec. There's a disconnect. Hold on. There's a slight difference in analogy now, isn't there?
Yeah. Exactly.
What 10th Man's saying is team with a circle around Globebusters, Ballbusters, anybody else talking about this subject. There's a big circle around all of us, and we're all on one field, and our opposition is Globe. That's the teams as they've been laid out in analogy by 10th Man. Then you've got the teams laid out very differently now, haven't you, Adam? You've got circles around Ballbusters and circles around Globebusters and circles around other people. And you're saying they should be following our team's play when they go out on the rink after us.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's okay. If we're talking about using that analogy to real life, I think that's probably a little closer. They've not been training all week, have they? We've been training all week, and then we're staying there. Oh, you lot, we've got the best plays, and you're not using them right, you plums. And they're going, well, and it appears to me, they don't know the plays. They don't know the benefit of it. From when they do try and use it, they're not doing it right.
Let me finish.
But that's exactly.
Hold on, Chocolate. Hold on.
Go ahead,
10th Man.
Yeah, well, while we're going back and forth, I've seen in sports when the team comes up with a play and they start whooping the competition with it, the other teams copy it. They don't change it.
Yeah, that was just going to be my point. I was just going to say, it's a little weird then when another team that's supposed to be on the same side as you takes the play that you came up with that was awesome and says, that play's okay. It's just a regular play. Even though it's winning you the Super Bowl and shit. It's just a regular everyday play. But you haven't seen how this play has made the other team have to completely change their offense, their defense, their entire strategy. That's what people aren't getting.
Do you remember a few weeks back on Ballbusters, and I said, you're going to have to watch how our side react on this, because I realised that it took me time to get my head around it, because I wasn't taught logic in school. Most people weren't taught logic in school because we went to state schools. And it's not often that I get arguments that are presented based on logic, but with evidence that goes with it, formed in a logical argument. And it was quite new to me, I'll admit it. It's not something I've had to think about before. And then when I was presented this, it took me a couple of days and a couple of conversations with Nathan to see how strong it actually is. And you know, just tweak it in my mind and play around with it and just see if I could see problems with it. And I couldn't see anything with it. And I was like, I must be missing it. Maybe I'm just getting this wrong. Maybe it's my own ignorance here. So I was reluctant to commit anything to it. And I'm sure Nathan was kind of in the same ballpark for a day or two right at the start. But the reality is a lot of our side are still in this. And it's really simple. If the Earth's a sphere, there's got to be a geometric horizon. It varies with height, and we should be able to see it because boats are supposed to go over it, and we can't see that. So it can't be a sphere. It's that simple. It just gets complicated when we start using the phrase modus tollens and then start talking about P's and Q's. But the reality is that the basic argument is really fundamentally simple. Just remember the sign argument, and we'll always be okay with it.
To continue the analogy, it's kind of from talking to chocolate, just to continue the analogy. It is, right? You guys, those guys are here, right? We've got these plays for gridiron, for American football. Real good contact sport, right? And the people we're trying to hand the plays on, they're not playing American football. They're not playing a contact sport.
Right, they're playing two-hand touch.
I thought
I'm done with the analogies.
Yeah, okay. Well, then in that analogy, I see a big hole.
No, I see. Hold on. Let me just try and expand on Adam. Adam's been the closest so far in analogy. The thing I was going to summarise before we ran out of live time was to say that the thing when Adam's analogy is played out with circles around us and other people all in separate circles, that essentially is saying we're not all on the same team. That's basically what that's saying. Now, in your analogy, when you've got a play that's been played out in American football, and you're saying, well, they're not playing American football. Well, no. They're the commentators in the stands, but the commentators haven't recognised the play that they've just watched.
Yeah, that's even better.
Okay. So they are not playing the same sport. To me, doesn't make sense in an analogy. No disrespect to Adam at all, because they are saying that we are against the sphere, and FED is saying we're against the sphere, and we have this play, this modus tollens, this proof that is so logical that it negates a globe. So they can't have what they say they have. And your show is called Globe Busters, and we have proof that can't be a globe, and we're not playing the same sport. Then change your name.
Easy, Tiger. Easy. Any more for any more?
I check. Hello.
Hey, Brian.
Hello, Nathan. Hey, everybody.
Fall into this, Brian.
Someone's got to have last word. Who's having it?
I might say something small just before it finishes. The problem with the people who aren't getting on board with this is that they're trying to prove what type of gravity is. Yeah. That's where their heads are at, and that's the problem. They're not. They don't realize. They just don't know. They don't. They literally. That's where they're at. I can't put it any simpler than that. They're trying to prove what type of gravity is. So they're still in that. They're still stuck in a loop. You know, either they get on board or get left behind. You know, one or the other.
And with that, I'll say if you are watching this on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you're watching this live on Nathan Oakley 1980, this is where we bid you farewell. Massive thanks to both Discord and G+ panels for making this live show possible. I've been Nathan Oakley. Stay tuned if you're watching on the Nathan Oakley channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!